Okay, tell me if you've heard this before.
What is it? Is it the ball?
Oh, hi Vegeta. I didn't know you were here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Colonel Silver Subsaga of the Red Ribbon Army Saga of the Dragon Ball Retrospective. So at the outset, I am confronted with the question, why? Namely, why do this specific saga? Obviously, Goku still needed to reclaim his grandpa's 4-star Dragon Ball, but why did that have to take the specific structure that is the Red Ribbon Army Saga? Well, recall what I said in the last episode, that by the standards of the Tournament Saga, the series had no business being called Dragon Ball. Obviously, in order for the title of the series to be proper, the Dragon Balls needed to be the focus. So, of course, another hunt for the Dragon Balls was ideal. However, we also need to remember that the Pilaf saga was not very popular to the Japanese audience of the mid-1980s. While that might have just been growing pains, since the children of that time still thought of Toriyama as the Dr. Slump guy, we also need to understand that, frankly, the story was pretty bad, for reasons I've already explained. By this point in the series, nobody, not even Toriyama himself, knew that the Saiyan, Namek, or Cell sagas were going to be nearly as awesome as they ended up being. So from the point of view of the original Japanese audience, the Pilaf saga was just a downgrade from what they were used to. However, the Tournament Saga turned that around. The martial arts tournaments from Dr. Slump were on average far more popular than the rest of the series, so Toriyama took inspiration from that and threw in a tournament saga in Dragon Ball. This did indeed prove to be far more popular than the Pilaf saga, because apparently people are just suckers for tournaments. Hell, even I conceded that one of the few advantages the Tournament Saga had over the Pilaf Saga was its much more defined structure, which provided the audience with a much better sense of pacing and understanding of how long the saga was going to take. However, as I said last time, and as I restated a moment ago, this has the effect of causing the series title to be a lie. So, what to do? Toriyama's solution? Combine the two story types. Have there be a Dragon Ball hunting adventure, but make it so that fighting is still the main focus. In the Pilaf saga, the story was on the comedy, but as far as problem solving and overcoming obstacles was concerned, there was actually a wide variety of solutions. Dino caps for travel, stealth for stealing the Dragon Balls, shapeshifting for escaping the prison, so on and so forth. So how do you actually consolidate all of the various obstacles that our heroes may conceivably encounter so that fighting can be the one-size-fits-all solution, or at least the majority one? The best solution to that is to have it so that there is a single, overarching villain faction who opposes Goku at every turn, and having to fight that recurring enemy over and over again becomes the primary source of overcoming obstacles. But how do you actually facilitate that in a way that doesn't stretch credulity? In the Pilaf saga, the anime facilitated that by having it so that the Pilaf gang only once interacted with the main heroes directly before their manga debut. So we were left anticipating a direct confrontation the whole saga. Of course, that worked because, as I just said, the Pilaf saga had a variety of ways to overcome obstacles. But in a saga where fighting is supposed to be the primary solution, we can't really fall back on that for the entire saga. Goku has to kick some ass immediately, or else we're just redoing the Pilaf saga and all the lack of popularity that saga entailed. At that point, the best way to structure the story is to make it so that the main villain has a hell of a lot more than just 2 minions out in the field. That way, Goku can defeat some minions in combat immediately, and it won't be the end of the story because the main villain has a lot more where that came from. but at that point you're basically dealing with an entire army. Hence, the main villains of this saga shall be the Red Ribbon Army. However, that carries its own problems. Because this is fighting-centric, but not based around a tournament, that means it lacks an inherent structure, meaning that not even Toriyama, let alone the audience, knows how close we are to actually finishing the series. Yes, there are 7 Dragon Balls, so you'd think that gives us a 7-step structure towards the end, but unlike in a tournament, the balls can and will be stolen and reacquired. In a tournament, once a competitor loses, then that's it, he's gone. Not quite the same thing when it comes to a Dragon Ball hunting saga, which could theoretically go on forever. To put this in perspective, consider the sheer length of this saga compared to the previous 2. In the manga, the Red Ribbon Army saga begins in chapter 55, which means the Pilaf and tournament sagas combined lasted a total of 54 chapters. The saga ends with chapter 112, meaning that it lasts for a total of 57 chapters. This saga literally lasts longer than both of the previous sagas combined. Now, in terms of sheer raw length, that's nothing compared to the later series in the manga. The Android Saga, for instance, lasts for a whopping 90 manga chapters, and that's a highly popular saga. However, bear in mind that, at this point in the series, Toriyama is still wet behind the ears in terms of serious, high-quality storytelling with emotion and real stakes, and you can see how a lot of people, especially people who fell in love with the Dragon Ball Z first, can feel like the Red Ribbon Army saga just drags on and on, to a degree second only to the 10-episode-long Namek explodes in 5 minutes section of the fight against Frieza. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, let's just analyze the Colonel Silver Subsaga and see how this Subsaga stands on its own. But before we do that, everyone is expecting me to talk about this next bit, so let's talk about it. This story can't happen just yet. Remember, in the climax of the Pilaf saga, when Oolong made his wish, Bulma exposits that the Dragon Balls are supposed to be untraceable stones for a year. So Goku heads off to Master Roshi's to train. He does so for 8 months, and then he participates in the World Martial Arts Tournament, and then sets out to reclaim his Dragon Ball. This means that it should still be 4 months until the Dragon Balls should be active, and yet they are. To be fair, the anime throws in the Roaming Lake episode, which we could interpret as taking a long time to wrap up, but 4 whole months? Seriously? Except even that doesn't work because we actually see Goku get a signal on the Dragon Radar before he even begins his adventures with Nam. Hell, even if you consider the time Master Roshi and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo spend recovering from their pufferfish poisoning, it's honestly stretching credulity to suggest that that can account for 4 months of time. In the real world, people who survive pufferfish poisoning typically make a full recovery in a few days to a few weeks. The closest I've ever heard anyone get to offering a theory for this plot hole that actually makes sense is the fact that because Oolong's wish was so simple, it used up considerably less power from the dragon, allowing for a quicker recovery time. Kind of like how you need significantly less rest after a light workout than after an intense one. However, that's exclusively fan theory. Nowhere in the original series or even any official supplementary material does it ever suggest that this is the case. In fact, the official canon seems to go in the opposite direction, that it's actually more power, not less, that shortens the time limit for things, at least in regards to fusion. So the only real way you can truly say this is anything other than a blatant plot hole is if we somehow assume that 4 4 months worth of stuff happened during the tournament saga that we don't get to see. And if we are going to go that route, the Funimation dub actually makes that pill easier to swallow, albeit inadvertently. In the Japanese version, if we are to assume that 4 months of stuff happened off-screen in the tournament saga, we still have to rationalize why Goku is still 12 years old. Recall that I made a big stink about it in the Pilaf saga that we were looking at a 12-year-old boy's crotch, and in the tournament saga, Goku once again stated that he was 12 years old. But if a year had passed in between the bathroom scene in episode 2 and that interview, Goku should be 13 years old. However, I also said that him saying he was 12 during the bathroom scene was only in the Japanese version, whereas the Funimation dub merely changed his dialogue to him begging Bulma to let him help her scrub her back. This means that in the Funimation dub, Goku's in-universe age was never explicitly stated until the interview. This means that, by Funimation's account of events, Goku would have been 11 at the time of the Pilaf saga, which would honestly make his nudity in that saga even creepier, but I've already said my piece on that, so I'll move on. This would make it ever so slightly easier to accept that a full year has passed, although you still have to account for 4 whole months worth of stuff, and where exactly in the previous saga there's an organic place to put that stuff. So yeah, let's dust off our old scoreboard and award a point to the Funimation dub for improving on the story with its creative changes. This almost certainly wasn't a conscious choice on their part. They probably had no idea this could be used to rationalize a plot hole 2 sagas later, but it is what it is. Then again, I'm a filthy dubtard, so what do I know? So the saga starts off with the complete opposite of what the last saga started off with. Whereas the last saga started off with Goku wanting food when he was surrounded by wild game that he easily could have caught himself, this saga starts off with Goku collecting his own food. We then cut to a flashback of the Great Ape destroying Pilaf's castle, only to realize it's not even a flashback at all, but a dream. Pilaf wakes up, opens the window, and nearly gets sucked out of his own flying fortress, foreshadowing what's going to happen around this same time in the next episode. Goku goes for a swim. Again. Even though he was swimming in literally the previous episode. And both of these scenes are filler, so it's not like Toei was simply following the manga. Of course, the purpose of having Goku go swimming is so he'll leave his stuff unguarded so an orphan can steal it. It also shows off Goku's cunning and resourcefulness when he remembers that he can locate his stuff just by calling out for his power pole to extend. This is the first time the power pole has ever responded to anyone other than the one holding it, and I'm 99% sure that never happens again. While this is happening, Colonel Silver's soldiers invade a random family's home, demanding the Dragon Ball. When the family doesn't know what he's talking about, he orders his men to simply tear the home to the ground in search of it. This is Colonel Silver's, and by extension the Red Ribbon Army's, character establishing moment. Something that a character does when we see them for the first time or shortly after we see him for the first time that instantly tells us what kind of person he is. For example, in the first episode of Dragon Ball Z, when we see Raditz for the first time, we see him kill the farmer with a shotgun in cold blood. Sure, the farmer shot at him, but he was still no threat to Raditz, as evidenced by the fact that he caught the bullet with his bare hand. So when he flicked the bullet back at the farmer like a marble, killing him, it was entirely in cold blood, and that instantly tells us what kind of person Raditz is. Meanwhile, in the first episode of OG Dragon Ball, our first few scenes with Goku show us that he is uncommonly strong, but also one with nature and extremely playful. For Colonel Silver, and by extension the Red Ribbon Army, we instantly see through this home invasion that they are ruthless in their pursuit, and they have no regard for the rights of others. Even if the residents insist that they don't have the ball, and even if Silver has no reason to think they're lying, he doesn't care. He'll wreck their entire home just on the off chance that the ball might be there, because hey, it's not like he's the one who's gonna have to rebuild that thing. This sets the tone for the entire rest of the saga, long after Silver himself actually gets written out of the story. Goku gets his clothes and pole back, but the orphan still has the dragon radar. He takes it to a shady shopkeeper who buys it from him for 10 zenny. The kid gets a surprising amount of food for that petty change, considering that amounts to less than 7 cents American money. This episode first aired in Japan in September of 1986, and that only amounts to 21 cents adjusted for inflation. How the fuck did he get this much food from that? However, one thing to note is that when the shopkeeper inspects the radar, it shows us that the Dragon Ball is right there. He doesn't know what the radar does, but we do, so we know if he must have a Dragon Ball. Emperor Pilaf also tracks the Dragon Ball to his shop, and the shopkeeper appears to sell it to him. Pilaf throws a ton of money at the merchant in exchange for the ball. I have to wonder, where did Pilaf suddenly get this newfound generosity? Remember that in the Pilaf saga, one of the biggest reasons I argued that Bulma was a good guy despite her willingness to trade on her sexuality was the fact that despite said alleged sluttiness, at least she never resorted to outright stealing the balls, whereas Yamcha and Pilaf both did. So why is Pilaf now so willing to pay a shopkeeper for the ball when just 8 months earlier he outright stole the balls from the Dragon Ball gang? Narratively speaking, the most likely reason why he's being written to be more generous now is that it helps to contrast him with the Red Ribbon Army in order to illustrate the upping of the stakes. Whereas Pilaf is conniving, the Red Ribbon Army is ruthless and will take what it wants with no regard. However, we don't really need that in order to make the Red Ribbon Army appear as an upgrade over Pilaf. We already have that with their performances. Whereas Pilaf was bumbling and inept, which was appropriate for a mostly comedy-focused saga, the Red Ribbon Army is competent and massive. That alone gives us a huge contrast that causes the Red Ribbon Army to appear as the bigger main threat. So there's no need to have Pilaf act out of character just to show the escalation. So Pilaf meets Goku outside the shop, and once Goku hears that there are 4 stars on the ball, he immediately chases after it. This actually makes Goku out to be more of a bad guy than Pilaf is, since Pilaf legitimately paid for it and Goku is the one seeking to take it back by force. He does eventually convince Pilaf to give him the ball willingly once Pilaf is plummeting to his death, but the only reason it came to that is because he was accosting them through the window. Anyway, during the pursuit, Goku notices that the Dragon Radar says that the Dragon Ball is still at the shop. Pilaf notices it too. Meanwhile, Colonel Silver tracks the Dragon Ball to the shop, and the shopkeeper claims he has what they're looking for. It's then shown that he has an entire case full of fake Dragon Balls. He offers to sell one to Colonel Silver, but Silver somehow knows this is a fake. How he knows that just by holding it in his hand, it's never explained. Anyway, he proves that it's fake by dropping it to the ground and causing it to shatter. He explains that this proves it's fake because Dragon Balls are unbreakable. How the fuck do you know that? This is a filler scene, meaning that Akira Toriyama is at liberty to write and lore in the future that completely contradicts this statement, much like Dr. Flap being the android's creator in filler, only for that to be contradicted years later by the manga introduction of Dr. Gero. Surprisingly, however, this never is. Despite it being included very early on in the series, there is never any point anywhere in the series where we ever see anything that explicitly contradicts this statement. In Dragon Ball Z, there is a moment where Whiskers the Wonder Baldo attempts to destroy a Dragon Ball, but it gets snatched from him before he's able to, so we have no idea if he'd be successful or not. When Vegeta and Nappa come to Earth, Vegeta scolds Nappa for possibly destroying one of the Dragon Balls, but then again, how would Vegeta know about that little detail about them? Later in the Majin Buu saga, Piccolo warns Gotenks about the risk of destroying the Dragon Balls, but that could be written off as just him being worried about keeping the Earth intact. The only time the Dragon Balls are unequivocally destroyed is when Kid Buu blows up the Earth and the Dragon Balls are destroyed along with them. But even that doesn't explicitly contradict Colonel Silver's claim that the Dragon Balls are unbreakable, since it required literal planetary destruction to destroy them, whereas Silver was able to destroy this fake one simply by dropping it from chest height. So yeah, even though this is anime filler, it is surprisingly uncontradicted by manga canon lore, which is impressive considering how early in the series this filler is, and how other filler from this saga will indeed be explicitly contradicted later down the line. So Colonel Silver demands the real ball from the shopkeeper, claiming he knows it's here, but a cutaway shows that the real Dragon Ball is actually in a bird's nest on top of the building. So since the shopkeeper is obviously unable to produce the real ball, since he doesn't even know he has it, Silver shoots him dead. So, this episode introduces the idea that there are others out there besides Bulma and the Pilaf gang who actually know about the Dragon Balls. They and the Red Ribbon Army are the only ones who know about the Dragon Balls without any known origin of that knowledge. Every other villain in the series get their knowledge of the Dragon Balls either from Pilaf or from the Z-Fighters. Even King Piccolo, who is telepathically linked to Kami, who created the Dragon Balls, still has to learn about them from Pilaf. However, if the legend is that obscure, I have to wonder how this random shopkeeper in the middle of bumfuck nowhere somehow knows about them to the point where he can literally craft exact replicas of them that look real so he can sell them for a huge markup. And for that matter, if the Red Ribbon Army knows about the Dragon Balls and they have the radar to locate them, why are they only just now searching for them? Where were they last year during the Pilaf saga? The best theory I can postulate as to why they're only just now entering the Dragon Ball hunt is because of the eclipse in the last saga. When Pilaf summoned the Eternal Dragon, it was already night where they were, but later at the end of this saga, the Eternal Dragon is summoned during the daytime and the sky still turns dark. From this, we can reasonably assume that the sky must turn dark all over the planet. This is an important contribution to the mythos, as later, during the Namek saga, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo will surmise that the Dragon Balls hadn't been used yet for this very reason. Therefore, it's reasonable to assume that Commander Red, somewhere else on the planet, found himself in an eclipse, even though that should be impossible at the time, since the full moon was hovering over Pilaf's castle, meaning the moon wouldn't even be visible at all on the other side of the planet at the time. He probably also noticed that the horizon wasn't dark, and he probably put two and two together that the Dragon Balls were being used, which in turn means the legend he heard about the Dragon Balls must be a true story and not just a legend. Of course, while that explains why he would suddenly be in the hunt for the Dragon Balls, it doesn't explain how he would commence his search for them only 8 months after the eclipse. Even if we accept the commonly espoused fan theory that Oolong's simple wish used up such little power that the Dragon Balls were able to respawn quicker than normal, Commander Red had fuck all way of knowing about that. So anyway, the next episode begins in earnest with Commander Red monitoring the radar. Now, for those of you who already know how this saga ends, this next line from Red might sound a bit jarring to you.
It's only a matter of time before they retrieve them, and I rule the world.
We'll just chalk that up to yet another thing that happens in this saga in filler that will be contradicted by the manga later down the line. It's starting to become quite a list. So anyway, Goku is continuing to pursue Pilaf. Pilaf is about to fall to his death, but he agrees to give Goku the Dragon Ball if Goku saves him. Since Pilaf now knows the ball is fake, he has nothing to lose for agreeing, but Goku eventually realizes it's fake too, so he recommences his search. We cut to the Ox King and Chi-Chi, the latter of whom is lovesick for Goku. Ox King has apparently made peace with the villagers, and he takes Chi-Chi to a psychic, who correctly predicts that Goku will arrive soon, but doesn't say what his reasons for coming are. Chi-Chi thinks that she's about to get married to Goku, and even tells her father this, who is surprisingly supportive of her aspirations, putting up only a token resistance, then running off to make preparations. Meanwhile, Colonel Silver is tracking the bird with the Dragon Ball, but before he's able to shoot it out of the sky, it gets eaten by a pterodactyl, which immediately gets killed by a giant boulder to the head thrown by the Ox King, looking to use it for the wedding feast. Colonel Silver recognizes the Ox King and acknowledges how formidable he is, and yet he is still unshaken. By contrast, when Pilaf pulls up in search of the Dragon Ball, Pilaf apparently has never heard of Ox King, yet he becomes visibly shaken just by hearing one of Ox King's old nicknames. When Pilaf reads the welcome back sign and realizes they're expecting Goku, he hatches a plan to have Shu pose as him so they can steal the Dragon Ball and skedaddle. Apparently, everyone in the village is an idiot because nobody recognizes that it's clearly someone in a helmet whose mouth doesn't even move. Meanwhile, the real Goku comes across Chi-Chi and the two have a tender moment. Chi-Chi is quite direct with her language, stating that she expects they're about to be married. Anyone of average intelligence would instantly recognize that he needs to clear some things up, but because Goku is an idiot, he doesn't know what Chi-Chi is talking about, nor does he realize he should actually ask Chi-Chi what she's talking about. Meanwhile, back at the Ox King's palace, Pilaf tells Shu to ask for the feast to begin so they can get the Dragon Ball. Wait, how do you know that it's inside the pterodactyl's belly? You showed up immediately after that happened, so you didn't get to see that. Anyway, the servants bring in the food. Ox King gives Not Goku a pat on the back, which knocks Shu's mask clean off. Pilaf diverts Ox King's attention momentarily while he and Mai put the helmet back on, backwards, which makes the Pilaf gang officially more pathetic than the Shockmaster. For all the things that went wrong at the Shockmaster's debut scene, he at least put his helmet back on straight. But right before Ox King can suss out that this isn't really Goku, Colonel Silver comes rumbling in, causing mass panic. A moment ago, Silver acknowledged Ox King's ferocity, but was nevertheless undeterred. And here, he backs up that confidence by quickly and easily defeating Ox King just by shooting some slime over his eyes and trapping him in a net. Bear in mind that during the Pilaf saga, Goku couldn't harm Ox King at all, and now Colonel Silver defeats him in less than 30 seconds. This is one of the most common ways that Dragon Ball will establish a new villain by having him effortlessly defeat the previous villain if that villain is still alive. Raditz tanks Piccolo's strongest attack without flinching. Frieza comes to Earth just long enough for Trunks to slice him to bits. Beerus defeats Majin Buu using only one arm. So on and so forth. It's an easy way to showcase how powerful a villain is, but in my opinion, it's heavily overused. Fortunately, this early in the series, it's not quite overdone to the point where it feels formulaic. Anyway, Goku and Chi-Chi notice the smoke off in the distance, so they run in to try and save the day. Pilaf takes the opportunity to snag the Dragon Ball and makes a break for it, even managing to get to his fortress with it and give Silver the slip. Also, the Red Ribbon Army can actually capsulize their tanks, which honestly stretches credulity. Oh, I don't doubt that Capsule Corporation could put tanks in capsules, but I refuse to believe they would. For the two of you who are watching this retrospective series without having seen the show, know that Bulma's dad, Dr. Briefs, is actually the scientist who invented the dino caps, and I do not believe that he would agree to have literal war machines like tanks be available in capsule form. What's next? Fully assembled meth labs that can be capsulized down? While he might make capsule tanks if the government asked him to, I refuse to believe he'd do it for the items that a private gang like the Red Ribbon Army would be able to acquire. It's one thing to have rifles or swords be available in capsule form. I can readily believe that Dragon World has its own version of the Second Amendment, but tanks? Sorry, no way that happens. Hey, if you made it this far into the video, you're obviously enjoying the video. So why not show how much you enjoy my content by throwing some monetary support my way? If you're watching this video during the initial premiere, the quickest and easiest way to throw some support my way is through Super Chats. Even if you didn't catch this video during the initial premiere, Super Thanks should still be available. You can also support me on a recurring basis by becoming a channel member. Those who support me that way get access to my Discord account and my official Discord server, allowing us to chat about anything, anytime. It doesn't even have to be related to video games, Dragon Ball, or my channel in any way. Just about anything that may strike your fancy, within reason of course, I am up for a conversation about it on Discord. So what are the benefits of supporting me with donations? Well, in addition to my eternal gratitude, as well as the aforementioned Discord contacts, Silver supporters, that is, those who support me with recurring payments of at least $5 a month, are allowed to request video topics from me. I only entertain video requests from those who are supporting me on a recurring basis, for reasons I explain in this video right here. Of course, if you want to be guaranteed to have your video request fulfilled within certain common sense limitations, of course, then you can become a gold level supporter, supporting me with recurring donations of at least $20 a month. When you do that, you get to commission videos from me about specific topics and, subject to certain reasonable limitations, I am guaranteed to fulfill that request. Of course, I want you all to understand that this support is 100% optional. It is much appreciated if you provide it, but if you don't provide it, I think no less of you. Even if you cancel your support later down the line, I will accept that cancellation with grace and thank you for the support you already gave. And to prove it, here are a few testimonials from some of my past and present supporters.
A bit after I became a bronze member of the channel, Acer sent me a message thanking me for my donation and asking what I felt he could do better with this content. It's really cool to have a content creator who engages actively with his fans in this way, and makes the channel feel less like a soulless group of videos and more like an actual community. He's also one of the few creators who doesn't try to guilt you if you have to stop your monetary support, instead just asking you to support the channel in other ways. It's refreshing to have a content creator who treats his subscribers and supporters like individuals and members of a community, rather than just faceless numbers.
If there's one thing that Acer has, it's easily time for his fans, and that was really evident to me the second I decided to donate. Even though it was just $1, he was just really quick to come thank me and was never really against any ideas I had for his channel. It felt really cool to kind of be a part of his channel as it's growing. It was definitely worth it. I would recommend it.
I've been supporting Acerthorn's Patreon for over a year now, not only because he's a great content creator, but also because he's extremely grateful to his Patreons for any and every contribution they make. Even if you join his $1 tier, he will still reach out to you to show his appreciation for your support.
Hi, I'm Verb. Not to take up too much of your time, but I want to talk to you about donating to Acerthorn's channel. I've only recently started doing so now that I have the chance to, and I'm happy with how it's been so far. He's grateful about whatever you give him, and he doesn't ask for much. He doesn't try to keep you donating or pressure you. All he does is just feel grateful if you give him anything. So, if you're feeling a little bit generous and you like the content he makes, you should absolutely go ahead and donate to him.
But even if any and all forms of direct monetary support are entirely off the table, there are still ways to support me. First, pretty please turn off your ad blocker. If you can't support me directly, ad revenue is the only option I have. Second, be sure to leave a like on my videos and also leave a comment. Even if you can't think of anything to say, just leave some kind of comment. You could just say, here's a comment just for engagement. Or you could just say, of course, engagement helps boost my videos in the algorithm, but remember that views and watch time are still king. So the best way you can support me without money is by binge watching my videos. I have playlists where I separate my videos by topic, so you can literally leave the computer unattended while you give me passive views on the videos that you most care about. Views, watch time, and most importantly, ad revenue. Any and all forms of the aforementioned support, or any combination thereof, are all very much appreciated. Alright, recommencing the video you all came to see in 3, 2, 1. Anyway, once they start recovering from the attack, Goku realizes he needs to chase after the Dragon Ball. Chi-Chi demands that he stay for the wedding, and Goku says he'll try some of that next time and runs off. Chi-Chi screams at Goku that wedding isn't a food, and that's the last we see of Chi-Chi and Ox King for the rest of the saga. Remember during the Pilaf saga when I said that they altered the dialogue between Goku and Chi-Chi so that they simply asked each other if they were going to think about each other again? But I mentioned that there was another scene later in the series that potentially undid the plot hole that dialogue change would eventually lead to? Well, this is that scene. Here, Goku, even in the Funimation dub, says he'll return to claim some wedding later. So that helps to explain how Goku remembers misunderstanding what Chi-Chi meant. Granted, the series will still flash back to the Pilaf saga footage, but that's only because that's the footage that was used in the original. Funimation can change the dialogue, but it can't change the footage. Except for when it can. Of course, this really risks creating another plot hole in its own right. The last thing Chi-Chi says to Goku is, "Wedding isn't a food." Therefore, she should know full well that Goku doesn't understand what she means. Of course, that could be explained away by suggesting that Chi-Chi assumed that because she explained it to him that one time, he must know now that wedding isn't food. Of course, that's really pushing it. So Silver gets a call from headquarters telling him that the ball is in the desert they're overlooking. The soldiers decide to scrounge around in the dirt, and some of them fall through the quicksand and into Pilaf's underground prison. He offers to let them work for him, but surprisingly they instantly decline. It's actually kinda shocking that these soldiers have this level of loyalty to the Red Ribbon Army, especially since the army will show time and again in this saga that they have zero loyalty to any of the soldiers. On a side note, how the fuck did Pilaf bury his flying fortress underground without disturbing the land? The desert looks entirely undisturbed when the Red Ribbon soldiers start digging. So how did he manage to do that? Anyway, Goku is searching for the ball as well, and he runs up to a cactus to take a leak, which just happens to be right in front of one of Pilaf's cameras, so he gets a rather disgusting view. This is only the first of 2 of these types of jokes in this saga, and I personally feel the second one is much funnier. So Pilaf decides to give away his position and activate his turrets to try and shoot the Red Ribbon planes out of the sky. Silver calls for and receives reinforcements, and with those reinforcements, Pilaf decides to try and retreat. But as soon as his fortress takes flight again, the army surrounds and overwhelms Pilaf like a swarm of hornets, shooting the fortress out of the sky. Even Goku is forced to get out of there, one of the few times the enemy in this saga actually forces Goku to retreat. Goku calls for the Nimbus, but it's unclear if it can hear Goku's voice amid all the gunfire. With Pilaf's fortress going down, the Pilaf gang are forced to abandon ship, parachutes in tow. However, they end up falling right in the middle of a massive army, with hundreds of rifles pointed at them from all directions. Silver politely extends his hand, and with no choice, Pilaf relinquishes the Dragon Ball, ending the episode with a solid Red Ribbon Army victory and the torch being definitively passed. Just as they did last episode against Ox King, the Red Ribbon Army has now also usurped the main villain of the last saga, establishing themselves as the new big bad. As far as villain introductions go, this is absolute badass. In fact, I would even dare say that this is one of the best villain introductions in the entire original series, second only to the first time we see Cell. Colonel Silver handily defeats both of the biggest villains of the Pilaf saga, thereby facilitating a definitive passing of the torch. Not only that, but it's one of only 2 times in the entire saga when even Goku himself is forced into a tactical retreat. The second time this happens, the Red Ribbon Army has to literally outsource the job to an independent contractor just to have even that much of an effect on Goku. One criticism I have heard of this Subsaga is that it completely screws up the sense of escalation. The first 2 episodes are entirely filler. In the manga, Silver is only shown to be in charge of 2 men, and Goku defeats the entire Silver squad in only a single chapter. But here, Silver's increased role seems to make the rest of the Red Ribbon Army look small by comparison.
This is funny and stupid fluff, I enjoy it, but I hate what they do with Silver's character here. To me, it just totally ruins him. Silver is built up into the absolute biggest badass, and as a result, that sense of enemy progression that I praised is gone here. Originally, he's just some low-level thug employing a couple of local yokels to search for a Dragon Ball. Here he has hundreds of troops and tanks and artillery. He rivals the forces of General Blue, and General White absolutely pales in comparison.
However, I disagree. First of all, there's no hard and fast rule that says that you have to show the weakest villains first. That might be good video game design, but there's no rule in storytelling that requires this. But there is a rule, not just in storytelling, but in life, that says that you never get a second chance to make a first impression, so it's important that the series put its best foot forward. But even barring that, it simply isn't true that Silver has hundreds of troops and that his forces rival General Blue. You know how I know this?
Silver to base! Silver to base! I found the enemy's headquarters! Send reinforcements now!
Roger, we'll send in Brown's army.
It's only after Brown's reinforcements arrive that the army overwhelms the Pilaf gang through sheer force of numbers. It's only then that the fighter jets swarm Pilaf's fortress like hornets, and only then that they have the Pilaf gang outnumbered 100 to 1 when they parachute down. Prior to that, in his very first appearance, Silver on his own only had 3 tanks and 1 jeep at his disposal. When he was preparing to search the desert, he only appeared to have about a dozen troops under his command. So yeah, the overwhelming numbers we see at the end of this episode are mostly from Brown's squad, and since we never get told what Brown's rank is, we have no way of knowing how unreasonable it is for him to have this many men. I personally feel it is genius to have Colonel Silver only win thanks to reinforcements, as it demonstrates that the Red Ribbon Army as a whole, which is the main threat, not Colonel Silver for his own sake, is far greater than the sum of its parts. Pilaf was able to give Colonel Silver the slip, but so what? The Red Ribbon Army has overwhelming numbers that it can call in whenever things get tough. I'm reminded of Skyrim's Civil War questline. During that questline, Ulfric won't march on Solitude if the Emperor's cousin is getting married or if the Emperor himself is in town, because while he feels he's a match for General Tullius, he knows he'd be crushed if the Empire sent the full breadth of its army into Skyrim. Meanwhile, during Season Unending, General Tullius even says as much, believing that if he can convince the Emperor to spare enough men which he actually does have in his command and absolutely could deploy if he wanted to, the Stormcloaks would be no match for them, and everyone knows it. Brown's reinforcements paint a similar picture when it comes to the Red Ribbon Army. Goku may handily defeat Red Ribbon Soldier after Red Ribbon Soldier in this saga, but there will always be that looming threat that Goku's success is only due to him only coming across a handful of soldiers at one time. It won't be until the very end of the saga that Goku is able to defeat the entire army at its full strength, and that was only after Goku had dramatically increased his strength from where he was now at the hands of a legendary master. In this Subsaga, even the mighty Goku was forced to retreat in the face of the Red Ribbon Army's overwhelming might and numbers. So yeah, overall, the Red Ribbon Army is clearly established as a credible threat. So in the beginning of the next episode, Silver is seen doing chest presses, but the cables are wrong. The cables are above the handles, so there should be absolutely no resistance for him doing the chest presses. The cables up top would provide resistance if he were doing tricep pushdowns or lat pulls, but for chest presses, the cables need to be behind the handles, not above them. Basically, the cables need to be in the opposite direction of where you're pushing or pulling. Anyway, Silver then jumps into the ring and takes out 3 of what are supposed to be world-class professional boxers without being hit once by any of them. So it turns out the Flying Nimbus did in fact hear Goku's call despite all the gunfire and came to his aid. Of course, I'd be surprised if it didn't hear Goku, since it can obviously hear Goku from anywhere on Earth, so clearly it isn't limited by the human's capacity for hearing. Meanwhile, Colonel Silver is meeting up with Commander Red as they discuss their prospects. Red sees that he only needs 4 additional balls, suggesting that he already has 3 of them. But that's ridiculous, since he only has the 1. By the time Goku invades the Red Ribbon headquarters, they'll have 2 and Goku will have 4. This episode initially aired in Japan on October 8th, 1986. At that point, the latest manga chapter was The Lost Dragon Ball, which was the beginning of the Fortune Teller Baba saga. That was only 1 day before this episode aired, so let's cut that episode some slack. Even then, the previous 2 chapters had Goku attacking the Red Ribbon Army headquarters, so it was well established in the manga by that point that they only had 2 Dragon Balls. So yeah, Toei completely dropped the ball on this. Goku notices that another Dragon Ball is nearby and sets off to find it. While there, he saves a baby monkey from a panther, which I find rather odd. It's not like you're saving a human child from a human predator. This is just the law of the jungle, and as a feral child who is still largely acclimating himself to human society, he should know that better than anyone. Sure, the panther was going to eat that monkey, but only so the panther can survive. By fighting off the panther, Goku may be saving the monkey's life, but he's also effectively forcing the panther to starve. He's basically saying that the monkey's life is more valuable than the panther's life, even though they're both subhuman animals, simply because the monkey is more cute and cuddly than the panther is, which is blatant pretty privilege. Who'da thunk it that Goku is actually prejudiced like that? Cutting back to Roshi's island, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is doing push-ups with Roshi, Turtle, and another turtle on his back. He passes out at 999 and Roshi gives him hell for that. Launch calls them in to eat ice cream, and Roshi claims that he does actually know where the Dragon Balls came from. Bear in mind that in the Pilaf saga, Roshi had the 3-star ball, but he believed it to be just some trinket that washed up on his shore a few centuries prior, and he was astonished to find out that the balls granted wishes. Also remember that this episode first aired in 1986, so it's not like Roshi had access to the internet to check up on the legend after hearing about it from Bulma. So where the hiffle did he actually get this legend? Come to think of it, maybe he just pulled it out of his ass right then and there just to appear more knowledgeable in front of Launch, which may go a long way towards explaining why it's so wrong compared to the official origin we'll get later in the series. And lest we forget, when he first met Launch, he actually lied about Goku and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo being his cousins. While I'm baffled that was supposed to be some sort of pickup line, it nevertheless shows precedent that Roshi is able and willing to lie out his ass to try and get in Launch's pants, so it's certainly in character for him. So anyway, the legend itself. Roshi claims that the balls used to be one giant Dragon Ball that contained all the power in the world to grant wishes, so some villagers decided to build a temple around it and put it inside a dragon's mouth. There's obvious god imagery here, which tracks in the Japanese version, where the eternal dragon is called Shenlong, which is Chinese for God Dragon. But as I explained back in the Pilaf saga, the Funimation dub, rightfully in my opinion, changed his title to The Eternal Dragon and removed all references to divinity, seeing as he never actually fulfilled any role in the story except for a genie. So by Funimation standards, the god imagery here feels a wee bit out of place. Anyway, Roshi explains that other nations in the world were understandably a bit jealous that this village just happened to get the Dragon Ball and all its omnipotent power just because they happened to inhabit the land it was found on, so people started waging wars over it. However, it turns out that the Dragon Ball didn't like that very much because apparently now the Dragon Ball itself is self-aware instead of the Eternal Dragon. Anyway, in order to ensure that the Dragon Ball can't be used for evil and no wars can be fought over it, it was split into 7 and its original power can only be tapped into when all 7 are brought together. Then again, that's kind of a self-owned goal if you think about it. All that means is that bad people will be fighting all over the planet in an effort to unite the balls, instead of just one spot. And if you don't believe me, well, just look at who our main villains are for this saga. Requiring someone to adventure all over the world to claim their wish is not going to stop bad people from using the balls for evil, not unless you personally subscribe to the philosophy that might makes right. Then again, that suddenly makes a lot more sense if we accept my theory that Roshi was just making this up in the moment. So after Roshi finishes his story, which may or may not have even been his story, the others discuss what their wishes would be. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo says he would wish for ultimate strength, which is interesting because as the series progresses, there will be more and more limitations on what you can actually wish for with the balls, but more strength is never listed as one of them. In a series where the main characters care only about getting stronger and stronger for its own sake, you'd think that at least one of them would jump on the idea to use the Dragon Balls to make themselves stronger, or at least to wish for the strength to defeat the current villain. Hell, in another filler episode, Goku's son actually wishes for the power to defeat Cell, but he does so as a birthday wish rather than with the Dragon Balls. Anyway, Launch says that she knows what she'd wish for, but we never hear what that wish is. Considering how much of a non-character Launch is, Toei probably intentionally omitted the wish because they couldn't think of anything that would befit her, since even they have no idea what kind of character she's supposed to be. At least with Whiskers the Wonder Ball, though, they have enough manga canon characterization that wishing for ultimate strength is close enough, but with Launch, they don't have anything, so they must have deliberately left it vague so the audience can speculate what the wish would be. So, back to the A-plot, Goku and the army are still searching for the ball, and 2 of the soldiers find it. However, the monkeys take it back before they can bring it to Silver, so instead, Silver orders the army to literally burn down the entire forest. When they spot the Dragon Ball, a monkey is running off with it, almost as if the monkeys somehow know that this is what the army wants and is determined to make sure they don't get it. Silver takes a sniper rifle, and while his men think it's an impossible shot, it turns out he isn't actually aiming for the moving monkey, but a stationary tree branch, causing the monkey to fall. Goku saves the monkey, but is unable to save the ball, which gets washed away by the river. It then begins to rain, and the army goes inside for the rest of the night. The next morning, the army is once again hard at work searching for the ball. Goku passes over most of them, laughing at how far off they are, since their radar can only tell where the Dragon Ball is within a 100-mile radius. Silver drives by and admonishes 2 of his soldiers for slacking on the job, and then drives off again, just in time for Goku to fly up and immediately find the ball. Unfortunately, it's the wrong one. The soldiers demand the ball from Goku, but since they're being pricks, Goku refuses to comply. When the soldiers try to pick a fight, Goku makes quick work of them, so they radio to Silver that the boy found the ball. This leads to the line I played at the beginning of this video, and yes, Christopher Sabat, the guy who did the voice of Vegeta in the Funimation dub, also did the voice of Colonel Silver, and if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because I also mentioned that name last episode, where I credited Sabat as Yamcha's voice actor as well. In fact, Christopher Sabat has voiced a ton of characters in the series. He's practically the default voice actor for the Funimation dub of this show. In addition to voicing Vegeta, Yamcha, and Colonel Silver, he also did the voices for the Sea Turtle, Shenron, Officer Black, Korin, Grandpa Gohan, King Piccolo, Mr. Popo, Kami, Piccolo Jr., Nappa, Bubbles, Guru, every member of the Ginyu Force except Captain Ginyu, Porunga, Mori, King Vegeta, the Otherworld Tournament announcer, Black Smoke Shenron, Omega Shenron, and Vegeta Jr. And that's just covering the original anime, not even counting the various roles in the movies or in Dragon Ball Super. The guy is fucking versatile, bro. Stephanie Nadolny and Sean Shamel may be the voices of Goku in the West, but Christopher Sabat is the voice of Dragon Ball in the West. However, that only makes it all the more jarring when Colonel Silver's voice temporarily dips into Vegeta's voice. Up until this point, Sabat has done a stellar job of making Silver sound like a unique person. He definitely sounds way different than Yamcha, who is the most prominent character he's voiced up to this point in the series. Of course, a voice actor as versatile and talented as this is allowed to slip up once in a blue moon, but it's still worth pointing out. So Silver spots the flying Nimbus and shoots it out of the sky with an RPG. This is Colonel Silver's first manga canon appearance, and in my opinion, it's strengthened by the addition of the filler. In the jungle scene, Silver shoots a branch to knock down a fleeing monkey, a shot which his subordinate thought was impossible. This establishes Silver as a master marksman, so when he's able to shoot down the flying Nimbus from 1,000 yards away, it doesn't come out of nowhere. Silver tries to interrogate Goku, but just like with the two soldiers, Goku isn't going to cooperate with someone who isn't being polite. Surprisingly, all Goku asks for is an apology for destroying his cloud, not even to actually make it up to him. I mean, the least you could ask for is alternative transportation. However, Silver wasn't around for when Goku kicked his two subordinates' asses, so he decides to pick a fight with Goku. It does not go well. Now, I've heard a lot of people criticize this section of the story, especially in the anime, where he's gotten tons of build-up and still goes down like a jobber, making all that build-up for naught. However, I personally don't mind. Remember that it's the Red Ribbon Army, not Colonel Silver himself, who is the main villain of this saga, and as I previously mentioned, their credibility as a major threat comes from their numbers, their resources, and their coordination. Silver only just got the word that Goku was flying off with the Dragon Ball, so he had to sprint outside right then and there in order to stop it. He literally didn't have time to radio in for reinforcements like he did with Pilaf's Air Fortress. Once it's just mano a mano, just him versus Goku in plain old fisticuffs, of course Goku is going to defeat him utterly. I'd imagine Whiskers the Wonder Baldo would be able to do the same thing. You know why? Because they were trained by Master Roshi, aka the greatest martial arts master in the world at the time. In the case of pure hand-to-hand combat, it would be straight up false advertising if anyone even could defeat one of Master Roshi's students, unless that person was also trained by a member of Master Roshi's extended social circle. Hell, even his time fighting the professional boxers doesn't put that much of a dent in Goku's ability to curb stomp him, any more so than the impressive physiques of all the fighters in the preliminaries in the last saga didn't really put any real dent on Goku's ability to defeat them. So Goku is now in need of transportation, and he gets the idea to search Silver's base for dino caps. Strangely, he actually calls them capsules instead of dino caps, and they will be called capsules for the rest of the series. No explanation is ever given for the sudden change in name. Also, it seems rather odd that Goku never gives even the slightest thought to the fact that he is basically stealing from other people. I mean, sure, they probably deserve it for blowing up the flying Nimbus and torching the forest, but at that point, isn't Goku basically taking the law into his own hands? And even if that were Toriyama's thought when writing this section of the story never addresses it in any way, shape, or form. When Nimbus returns, Goku is still able to ride it despite now being a thief, which only further supports my theory that being pure of heart in order to ride the flying Nimbus simply means that you have to have a mind singularly dedicated to only one or two passions, not that you have to be without sin or vice. So anyway, Goku throws one capsule and out pops a fully sentient robot. Turns out robotics in this universe have expanded to such a degree that robots are able to speak and interact with humans fully. In the real world, we're only just now inventing technology that even sorta mimics that. Hell, the robot is even programmed to give Goku sass.
I really need to go that way.
Then go that way.
The robot instructs Goku to throw a specific capsule for a plane and then offers to fly the plane for him. Now, one of the criticisms I've seen leveled against the filler in this Subsaga that I find to be patently without merit is the fact that once the filler ends and the anime starts covering manga canon material, all those soldiers that Silver had under his command are suddenly gone. But that's simply not true.
Then, once we land in the source material, all those troops are gone and Goku still manages to take him down instantly.
They're still at it.
So Silver radios in to report his defeat, and Red and Black contemplate their new foe. Of course, they're unconcerned about Goku at this point, and frankly, they have every reason to be. Like I said, so what if Goku managed to beat up one guy? It's the army as a whole that's the real threat. Of course, Red also demands that Silver be brought in to face accountability for his failure. Meanwhile, as the plane flies farther north, it gets colder. The robot apparently freezes his own circuits and shuts down, crashing the plane. Without proper clothes, Goku instantly freezes in the snow. However, some Red Ribbon soldiers notice the wreckage and go to investigate. Before they arrive, however, Goku gets pulled by the ankles by some random girl. This transitions into the next Subsaga, the General White Saga. As for the score, there are only 2 new songs that are introduced in this Subsaga. The first is called Dragon Ball Densetsu. It's sung exclusively in Japanese, even when you're watching the English dub. To me personally, it just gets in the way. It starts by simply saying the show's name over and over again.
Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball, I got it!
Hey asshole, I know what the show is called. You don't have to keep saying it over and over like the fucking Adam West Batman theme song. It only plays twice in the Subsaga, once at the very beginning of the first episode, and again while Roshi is giving his origin story of the Dragon Balls. In the latter, the song is downright intrusive because the lyrics can be heard over Roshi's exposition, making it difficult to hear what Roshi is saying because someone else is talking over him.
It was huge. I mean, really huge. It had to be. It held all of the mystical energies of the universe.
Kikuchi, shut the fuck up when other people are talking. The second new piece has no lyrics. In fact, I don't know if it's ever been given a name. When I found it on YouTube, it was literally just called the Red Ribbon Army theme, and this one I actually like. It starts out with a simple drum roll, which gives it a sense of military formality. But it then switches to a high-pitched yet slow-tempo tune, conveying just how evil the army actually is. And since it doesn't have any lyrics, it doesn't run the risk of talking over other characters. The Colonel Silver Subsaga isn't meant to be a saga unto itself, hence why it ends on a cliffhanger, but it still tells a complete story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. It's kind of like the Harry Potter books. While each one still had the overarching plot thread of Lord Voldemort, each one also had a self-contained plot. Same here, with Colonel Silver simply being the first of many major soldiers that Goku is going to have to overcome during this entire saga. The Silver Subsaga's primary responsibility is to establish the Red Ribbon Army as a credible threat, and as I already explained, it does that quite well. It's a very different type of threat than what Dragon Ball fans are used to, because as I explained, they rely primarily on numbers, resources, and coordination to assert their dominance, rather than superpowered individuals. However, their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. One could argue that they rely too much on their numbers and resources, as Silver demonstrates. Get one of them alone, isolated from all those numbers and weaponry they depend on, and they go down like flies. Eventually, even that weakness will be overcome, but we've got a long way to go before that's the case. This Subsaga also sets up the Red Ribbon Army's morals, as it shows a complete disregard for the rights of others, invading people's homes, killing random shopkeepers, and even burning down entire jungles just to get the Dragon Ball. This lack of regard for others will escalate in the next Subsaga, when they even resort to outright slave labor to achieve their ends. As an introduction to the saga, I honestly can't think of a much better introduction. It's a good thing then that this Subsaga was primarily written by Toei Animation and not by Akira Toriyama. Given Toriyama's lack of experience so far with serious long-term storytelling, he probably would have botched it up completely if he were forced by his editor to write out a full Subsaga for Colonel Silver. Because this isn't a full saga on its own, I won't be ranking it just yet. The Red Ribbon Army saga as a whole will receive a ranking compared to the previous 2 sagas once I complete it. So that was my take on the Colonel Silver Subsaga. Next time, the tables will be flipped when it comes to the ratio of filler to manga canon material when I tackle the General White Subsaga. In the meantime, however, please like this video, post some comments, share it with your friends, consider supporting me as a channel member, and oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later.